Why, hello, everyone. We're going to get started today. I always plan to have a more slick opening when I press start, but it never really happens the way that I want it to. All right, so as you can tell, today we're going to be dealing with the problem of evil in some sense. We're going to be talking about why bad things happen. And specifically, we're going to hear a little bit from one particular perspective. There is I would say, spiritual teacher, spiritual speaker. His name is Rupert Spira, I believe is how you say his name. I'm not super familiar with this person. I just found the video last night and watched it and was like, I have to talk about this a little bit. So, yeah, I want to just kind of watch it with you and share some of my thoughts. This is a little bit of a different, I guess, format. A little bit more intuitive. I have a lot less notes. I have no notes today, really. So I'm just going to kind of see what happens. But one of the things that I think is really important that I pretty much want to make very clear here is that, I don't know if anybody knows what they're talking about. Long story short. But a lot of times people will talk like they know exactly what they're talking about and they're very confident. I'm okay with confidence, right? But I kind of want to take a more scientific approach. And I'd rather say, according to the evidence that I have right now, this is the most likely option rather than this is what happens. But a lot of times you hear spiritual and religious folks, they'll talk like they know the truth, they have the truth. Um, Another thing that I want to mention is that oftentimes spiritual teachers will say very normal things all things happen for a reason. And then everyone's like, wow, that was so profound. I'm so blown away. And I've been there too. I have, found people's content and been really inspired by it. But then I watch it back with a clearer head and I'm like, there was actually not a lot here. Yeah, very, very little information here. So that's another perspective. That's another thing we're going to be looking out for. And the other thing is this video I titled, why does the universe allow violence to children? This video is titled, Why Does Consciousness Allow Bad Things to Happen to Children? And then in the video, you'll see the guy who's talking. He says, God, why does God allow these things to happen? So a lot of times these words are thrown around, but they oftentimes mean the same thing. And especially if you follow me on Instagram, you've probably heard me say stuff about, New Age spirituality being very closely linked to Christianity. And then when you start hearing people talking about consciousness in the same exact way that they talk about God, it should, I think, raise some questions. I remember how easy it was for me to go from evangelical Christianity to New Age spirituality types of beliefs. And I think that's because there's a lot of similarities in the way that you have to think. So with all of that said, let's dive in to the video here. Okay, so, but real quick, before I press play on the video, make sure that you check out the scroll down here. Make sure you subscribe, leave a comment about some of your opinions about why bad things happen. It'd be great if you left a comment about why you think bad things happen before we even get started, and then update your thoughts afterwards if they change or whatever. Also, if you want to support the channel, there's you can see the link to get there, or the URL is buymecoffee/Mad Magic. You'll see it on the scroll as well. And then also where you can find me in other spaces. All right, enough of that. Let's get into the video.
That's a very valid question. It's a question that has plagued theologians and philosophers since the beginning of time. Why is there evil? How can there be evil if God is all-knowing, omniscient, omnipotent, all good? How can there be evil? It's a very valid question.
So yeah, he's He's got to think. He's just repeated the question so far. He's in deep
Do you
thought.
understand that the infinite can only know the infinite? And that the finite can only be known by the finite?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just going to very briefly elaborate on that for those for whom that's not clear. That which is infinite, there's no room in the infinite for something that is finite. The infinite can, in order.
Okay, so the first thing that I notice here is I'm confused. Very confused. What, oh, his audio is very quiet and hard to follow. Thank you for saying that. Let me see if I can make that louder. Ah. Oh no, that's as loud as it goes. Let me see if I can unshare it or maybe, okay, let me try again. Apologize for the technical difficulties, friends. Okay, it's super, super quiet still. I'm not sure exactly why. I'll have to do some troubleshooting afterwards. So I apologize. Hope that's better.
In order to know finite experience, in other words, a separate object of experience, that separate object has to be known by a separate subject.
Let me know if it's better or worse here.
If you have a circle, imagine drawing a circle on a page, and this circle is a white circle that represents the infinite. All that is.
Okay, so what I want to do is draw this. He's talking about an analogy here. So he's saying that the infinite can't contain the finite. Once you put something finite within the infinite, okay, great to know that this sounds better. Once you put the finite in the infinite, it no longer is infinite. So he gives an example. I'm just erasing this whiteboard here. He starts off with, you just draw a big circle, a white circle. Boop. Okay, what next?
Is the white circle. Now, as soon as you draw a little dot, a little black.
Okay. So this is infinite, right? This is infiniteness. Maybe God is the infiniteness. And then you add a dot, which is finiteness, and that ruins it. So now it's not infinite anymore.
Circle. Inside the white circle, the black circle represents something that is finite. But as soon as we put a finite dot in the white circle itself is no longer infinite. A part of its infiniteness has been displaced by the black dot, and it is no longer infinite. It is finite.
I was really struggling with this because I think that I can like play along with what he's saying and kind of be like, okay, I kind of get like where he's trying to go with this. But I start to struggle because when I think about, like, for example, okay, this reminds me of the example of, can God create a rock so big that he can't lift? It's like kind of like the never ending question. Like, so if God can do it, if he can create a rock, or, whatever, sorry. No, if God can create a rock that, he couldn't lift, then that would mean that, he wasn't not impotent. He wasn't all powerful, omnipotent, or whatever. But if he cannot create a rock that's too big for him to lift, and he's, still doesn't have all the power in the world. So either way, it seems like this infinite stuff is, I don't know if this makes any sense. Like, truly, I don't think it makes any sense. And so Hollis says, like, but your circle has already restricted the infinite. Very interesting perspective. So like I think what Hollis means is that you just added a barrier or like a limitation to like contain it, maybe. That might be what you mean there. But yeah, this example doesn't feel like it helps me. This example doesn't feel like it helps me understand why children are involved in CSA. It doesn't tell me why children are, physically hurt. Why children are born with cancer or like get terrible diseases. None of this so far is answering these questions. But let's continue and see if he does.
So you cannot have the finite in the infinite. As soon as there is something finite, what was
It's not
infinite has itself become finite. I hope that's clear to most, if not all of you. So,
okay, sorry, I wanted to stop there too, because he explains this bizarre analogy, okay, that I'm trying to draw it out. I'm trying really hard to actually understand what he means, and I'm struggling to make connections here. Or yeah, I'm struggling to understand what this actually means. I feel like if something is infinite, then it's infinite no matter what. You can do whatever you want, but it's still infinite. But whatever. But he goes like, well, let me see if I can back it up. Just
for this reason,
and watch it
I
again.
hope that's infinite.
Okay.
What was infinite has itself become finite. I hope that's clear to most, if not all of you.
I hope that's clear to most, if not all of you. He says it in a way that he expects people to have understood this profound wisdom that he's just given. Oh, I hope that this doesn't boggle your tiny brains too much. And I'm making a lot of assumptions as I'm saying this. I don't mean anything about this person's character. Like I said, I don't really know much about this teacher at all. But I think that it's really important to notice how these subtle things that some of these spiritual teachers that can say that can be really misleading. And yeah, he's kind of putting himself in this perspective of he's, a big fancy teacher. He knows all the answers, whatever. And this is idiocy. What is the infinite composed of if it's not the finite? Yeah, it's like the infinite is composed of a bunch of finite moments, right? So like we are, we can't really, I guess, understand infinity in terms of time, I think, but like we are part of like, the, I guess, infinity of the universe. Like this is a part of the process, I guess. But yeah, it really, this really doesn't make much sense, but let's see. Okay. I think he's going to get into some more of the explanation. So let's hope that he helps me out understanding a little bit more.
So, for this reason, infinite consciousness by itself, although it is a realm or the realm of infinite potential, all things possible to be experienced are contained within it. It cannot directly experience objective objects, thoughts, images, feelings, sensations, perceptions by itself. If the infinite wants to have finite experience, it must cease being infinite consciousness. It must collapse or contract itself into a finite mind. And it is only from the point of view of that finite mind that it can view objective experience.
So I don't know about y'all, but for me, it's screaming Jesus. Okay. So let me tell you what I mean. So, God has to make itself tiny, smaller, or whatever, in order to have relate to our experiences of touch and pain and sadness and all this stuff. So Jesus is pretty much that example. That is like, all the power of God. He made himself nothing, came in the form of a servant, and came to serve us as people. He is the the teacher who has gone through all of the same experiences that we have gone through, and so he can understand us. I'm not sure if that's going to be important here, but I just think that that's an interesting perspective that he's sharing about the necessity of God or consciousness to experience the world through a finite being, which can be a human or a dog or a tree, I guess.
Now, that may seem complex, so let me make it really clear and simple. Every time we fall asleep at night, each of our minds, in this analogy, that your mind represents infinite consciousness. So imagine that your mind is not a limited mind. Imagine that your mind is infinite consciousness in the sense that you are capable of having any dream, all dreams possible to be dreamed could be dreamt by each of us tonight. We don't know what we're going to dream. However, tonight, each of us will have a dream, or most of us will have a dream. However, so in this dream that we have tonight, we will dream a new world. It won't be the world that we're familiar with, the streets of Amsterdam. It will be a complete, a different realm. It could be any kind of a dream. However, in order to experience that new dreamed world, we will have to enter into our own dream and view that dream from the perspective of somebody in the dream. In other words, when we dream at night, we forget that we are dreaming.
Okay, so I'm following him so far. So basically, we have infinite possibilities within our dream. And in order for us to, I guess, like really experience the dream fully, we have to kind of like forget that we're dreaming and really immerse ourselves in the dream. This is a good analogy. It does fall apart, I guess, if you were to say things like people who lucid dream. There are some people, I'm pretty sure, who like almost always lucid dream. So I guess they might not fit in this example, but I'm being persnickety, of course. Yeah. But yeah, Hollis, God is all of us as well as everything else that exists. Right.
And that's where lucid dreaming, we'll come back to that. We forget, the mind forgets that it is comfortably asleep in Amsterdam. It dreams a whole new world within itself. But in order to experience that world, it has to contract into a person in that world. It enters, our mind contracts and it enters into its own imagination as a separate subject of experience from whose point of view it is able to know the new dreamed world. So that is a model. Go back now to infinite consciousness. Infinite consciousness contains everything within it, just as our minds, relatively speaking, contain all dreams within them in potential. But in order to experience the world, this world, infinite consciousness has to contract. It has to enter its own imagination. It dreams the world within itself, but in order to experience that world, it has to forget itself. This is the key to your answer. It has to forget itself. It has to overlook itself. It's called ignorance in the Vedantic tradition. It's called the fall in the Christian tradition. It has to forget itself, look itself.
Yeah,
it's called ignorance in the Vedantic tradition. It's called the fall in the Christian tradition.
Okay. So, yeah. There's a lot of theories kind of about, I guess this might be similar to theories kind of about like, you know, God or consciousness had a desire to experience the world more deeply. So it made the decision, or this is okay. So I guess what I'm saying right now is a specific line of belief that some people hold. I don't know if that's what he believes in, but I think it might be a helpful place to bring it up. But okay, so consciousness wanted to experience the world, but it decided to forget and live as finite beings so that we could have the experience of the universe, and then the universe could learn about itself. Interesting perspective. There's a lot of implications in that statement. It implies that that God or consciousness is like an entity that wants things and has a desire for things and has an exact plan. But I think that at least from what I see in reality, things are a lot more chaotic. But within the chaos is beauty and pattern. Let me show you, I like to do a lot of geometric art. I'll just show you something that I did. Okay, so I drew this pattern, right? These are a bunch of cubes, right? And how I started this pattern was from another pattern. Let me show it to you, called the flower of life. Yikes. Maybe I erased it. I'm not sure where it is. It's a bunch of interlocked. Oh, here it is. This is the flower of life. Okay, bunch of interlocking circles that make these shapes. So why I'm bringing that up is because the universe likes to. It has come up and as I'm talking about it now, I'm personifying the universe, even though I don't really believe that the universe is a person or really an entity. And this is another smaller example of it. But basically, the world is chaotic, right? There is a lot of disaster and scary stuff that goes on, but there is a pattern to things. Plants grow in a very specific way. We see kind of the spiral that exists. There is a wisdom in the way that our bodies are constructed, the ratios and everything like that. So there is like some type of order and intelligence, but I would say that you would have to come up with some more evidence to say that like that intelligence implies like a specific brain or a specific consciousness. Okay. So let's move forward.
It has to forget itself. It has to enter into its own imagination. It has to shrink and contract into a separate subject of experience. That's each of us. The difference between the dream that each of our minds has at night and the dream of infinite consciousness is that we can only have one dream at a time. We dream sequentially, whereas consciousness can have innumerable dreams consecutively. And each of our minds are like dreams in the mind of infinite consciousness, or in God's mind, from whose point of view infinite consciousness is able to view its own potential as the world. But there is a price to pay, and this is the answer to your question. Just as each of our minds at night has to forget that it is dreaming and believe that it is a separate individual in the dreamed world, so infinite consciousness has to forget or overlook the knowing of its own infinite being and seem to become a separate individual. Now, that separate individual feels cut off from and separate from everyone and everything else, which is just how most people feel.
So I would really say that like these are really good ways of kind of describing the way that we have our human experiences, and I think can be used as useful analogies. Um, but like I think that it is a stretch to say that like that is what's happening. That like consciousness is this being or entity that like wants to experience things and like is aware that that it's experiencing dreams through each and every individual human being. Like, is there evidence for that? Like, there's evidence for a lot of things, but it's hard to have evidence for like consciousness because like we can't like test this stuff. I can't falsify any of these claims. And since I can't falsify these claims, if you watch any of my other videos about epistemology, if I can't falsify a claim, then it's not really a claim at all. Like it's not anything that we can do actual research on. You can choose to believe it if you would like to, but you have to understand that it's not something that you can like use with evidence. And I'm not sure who MC Escher is, but I'll have to look that up later.
Feel. And because of that feeling of being cut off, the separate self feels that it is a fragment and vulnerable.
We're getting into the why does bad stuff happen? I think here he's about to start talking about it now.
Now, these two feelings that are inherent in the sense of being a separate self, I am a fragment, I'm not the whole, and therefore I am vulnerable. And these two feelings, in order to allay, in order to get over the feeling of being a fragment, the separate self is continually trying to unite with others to find completion or fulfillment through activities and relationships, through objects, substances, activities. So one movement of the separate self is always to acquire, to seek fulfillment through an object, a substance, a relationship. That's one movement that is inherent in the separate self. And the other movement, in order to overcome the feeling of vulnerability, is to protect itself. I don't like you. Resistance. These are the two modes of the separate self, seeking and resistance. Although
I think that's very common. Yeah, like even the most primitive single cell organisms, I believe, show signs of kind of like approaching things that are useful for its kind of growth and evolution or whatever, and will move away from things that will stop that or cause pain or whatever. I don't think single cell organisms have pain receptors, but I think that you understand what I'm trying to communicate. But to imply that like a single celled organism, right, is like moving closer to something else for the reason of consciousness wanting to connect to itself is also something that like we can't prove. What we can prove is that like the evolutionary like drive that we have, like we know that exists. We don't know, like I don't think we know why that is, but that's that's the question. These are things that we can't answer, and I am honest enough to say I don't know, right? But Rupert knows the answer, so let's continue to see if he will explain a little bit more.
All the separate self is truly seeking is to be divested of its sense of separation and go back to its original wholeness. But it doesn't know that because it feels
we forgot that we wanted to be part of consciousness.
Feels separate, so it tries to complete itself through seeking and protect itself through resistance. And from the point, and as a result of these two activities, from the point of this separate self, the separate self will do things to others that it would not do to itself because it has forgotten that it is one with the other. So the separate self is able to act in ways that take advantage of other people, that are unkind to other people, that are cruel to other people, as long as those activities make it feel better.
Okay, here it is. Okay, really good. Awesome. So bad stuff happens because we are separated from consciousness and we don't know it. That sense of separateness that we can feel because we're separated from other people becomes so great that we cause violence towards others, etc. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Does that sound like original sin to anybody? Does that sound right? Because he said it was the same thing, that the the coming down of consciousness. I forget what he called it in the Vedic traditions, but the fall of man was in the Bible or whatever. So because we're separated from God, that's why we do bad things. Because you are a sinner, you were born in sin, you have a sin nature. That's why you do bad things. Not like because we're animals and animals can be violent, like especially humans. Like we are violent predators. Like we're like I think we evolved as meat eaters. That means we were killers. We killed animals to eat, right? Um, it's just part of our nature. We're jealous. We get very angry. We're very emotional beings. Isn't that why we hurt each other? Just because of that's just human nature? That could be a reason. That could be a reason that actually has the potential to be falsified and tested with evidence. But the reason that like it was because of the fall of man, or it was because consciousness forgot itself, we can't prove that. Here, Hava says, the fault here seems to be the assumption that because the infinite has contracted into the finite, that it now becomes finite, completely unconnected to itself anymore. Exactly. Yeah, exactly the point. And this is devastating because we're never disconnected. So like I struggle even to know like what words to use to describe what I'm talking about, because I don't believe that like God really exists, but like yeah. Now I forget exactly where I was going with that sentence, but that's fine. Let's continue.
Better about itself. So that's why it's possible for there to be.
Also, these pauses that he's giving, really, they're funny, I think.
So that's why it's possible for there to be unjust, unkind, unloving behavior. And yet the fact that there is such behavior doesn't contradict the fact that everyone and everything ultimately is made out of a single, infinite, indivisible, and loving consciousness.
Okay, even though we're separate from ourselves and like people are violently harming each other, and like trans people are like losing their rights, and like people of color are being ridiculed, and there's like a massive earthquake that just happened that killed thousands of people, and there's a war in Ukraine that's going on right now. All of those things are really great evidence that we all come from a singular loving energy. I don't see it. I struggled for a while to kind of grapple with the idea of the universe being like a loving consciousness. And the more that I kind of like looked at what I could see in the world, it I don't I don't think that that's the truth. Which is funny because a person like Rupert would say that I think that this isn't the truth because I forgot, because I'm consciousness and I forget. Um, but I don't believe that. So yeah, I think that I'm a person who has the capacity to do harm. I think that every person is a person who has the capacity to do harm because of the kind of animals that we are, the kind of species that we've evolved to be. And there's something else that he said that I wanted to touch on, but I forget what it was.
Ultimately is made out of a single, infinite, indivisible, and loving consciousness.
Yeah, just like I think I just wanted to make more point, but the fact that yeah, the loving consciousness thing, it's this is yeah, like this is something that I'm still I think working through and trying to figure out, but at least right now I'm pretty fine with saying that like the universe is neutral.
It just somehow seems
Oopsie. The universe is neutral. Um, it doesn't really care if we do a bunch of really loving things. There can be, I remember my wife told me about a person that she knew who was one of the nicest people that she'd ever met. And having a deep conversation with her, she found out that like two of her sons had been killed earlier in her life, and just wondered to herself like how that could happen to such a wonderful person. Um, because it happens because the universe is neutral. Things are random. I would say that like one of the things that I think um, like yeah, there are lots of examples of this. Yeah. It isn't self. Hold on one second. Yeah. I just was kind of finishing up what Hollis had said. The energy is still trying. So yeah. The energy now becomes finite, completely unconnected to itself anymore, but the energy is trying to know itself. So unsurprisingly, that it would do all kinds of things in that effort. I would think that like if consciousness were trying to know itself, it probably would try pretty hard to work to understand itself better or connect to itself. Um, but yeah, I think that like eventually it yeah, the analogy sometimes falls apart, I think. Yeah, I don't know if it's completely reliable, but let's continue to see what he says.
a lot of things just seem somehow unnecessary, even within. Well, but it is awareness. Even within that model, I think I feel.
Oh,
Well, but it is
okay. Sorry, this guy's now gonna give him a question, like, okay, which is good.
Is made out of a single, infinite, indivisible, and loving consciousness. It just somehow seems a lot of things just seem somehow unnecessary, even within. Well, but it is awareness. Even within that model, I think I feel what you're saying, but just the extremes are just so unacceptable. Why? Well, once infinite consciousness has forgotten itself and seemed to have become a separate individual, that separate individual is capable of all possible extremes in order to fulfill itself. So there is a price to pay for manifestation. Okay, good, thank you. Because the price to pay, so it's too high.
He's right. He's right. It's too high a price to pay. The other thing that I think of here is if we have this infinite consciousness, couldn't it have picked a better way of doing this? If consciousness is as infinite, if God is as in control as people claim, this is a bad experiment. Yeah. It's a very high price to pay for whatever this is. Yeah.
It's just okay. Good, thank you. Because the price to pay, so it's too high. It's just too high. Fuck madam. Sorry. Forget about manifestation. Then let's just go back to being. The price is too high. Yes, it's too high, and that is why it is incumbent on all of us. It is our sacred duty. Those of us that have either understood
What?
or who have begun to understand, and that includes everybody here, that separation and the terrible things that happen as a result of it is an illusion. And therefore our first duty
very good
in life, our first duty above all other duties, is to realize the non-separate nature of our being with all others and things, and to live the implication of that understanding.
Okay. I think I might want to listen to part of that again, just because I want to make sure I know what he's saying.
To pay for manifestation. Too high. Fuck madam. Sorry. Forget about manifestation. Then let's just go back to being. The price is too high. Yes, it's too high, and that is why it is incumbent on all of us. It is our sacred duty. Those of us that
Okay. So, okay. So, um, that I don't know. It looked like in his face, when you look at his face, he's searching for an answer, which isn't a problem, right, in and of itself. But oftentimes, like if a spiritual person is answering a question like that, I don't think he did research for this. He just like was up there kind of answering questions for people and just like pulled this out of his ass from all the stuff that he's learned in the past. Um, but to say that like okay, so this is the price to pay for us, having this life and manifestation, which I don't really understand what that meant specifically, but this is the price to pay for, this life or whatever. And the guy's like, this price is too high. Like, fuck manifestation then. Like, what's the point? If people are dying, but children are getting hurt, there's violence being enacted against children. What's the point? And he's like, well, that's why it's your responsibility to spread the news about consciousness and raise the vibrations of the world. Really? Really? Same thing as the Maharishi effect, right? With transcendental meditation. That if enough people meditate together in a room, that it's going to raise the vibrations of your town, and then violence will be reduced. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. I wish that it did. I really wish that it did. Like when, yeah, yeah, yeah. I wish that it did. I don't. I think like right now I'm at a place where I think that there's something that has to do with like the way that we can connect with other human beings in like a psychic type of manner with uh, a manner that we can't really maybe prove or have exact evidence for, a more complex way of connecting to other human beings and things like that. But even with that, like, yeah, this just seems like pretty far fetched, like okay, yeah. So psychic stuff, like some of those things could be accurate, could be valid, but it would take a lot to prove that like a person, like a group of people meditating in one area, has direct implications or changes on another area or something like that. Um, yeah, that's kind of all I want to say about that. And Hollis makes a great point saying that human judgment is quite limited, so this person's perspective on the motives of infinite consciousness can't be relied upon to be authoritative. Exactly. Nobody's truth is the only truth. And I want to even say that like I was someone who was like, okay, if a faith practice or whatever um, was invented a really long time ago and it's older, um, then like it's more trustworthy, which I think can make a little bit of sense. Like, some things that have, survived for a really long time, there's probably some validity to it. Like things like yoga is a very ancient practice. It has many benefits for several people, things like that, and is effective, in transforming people's lives and whatever. So I'm not saying that, there's nothing that's significant about a tradition that's lasted a long time, but it was still created by human beings who are fallible, right? People say that, the Bible is amazing because it was written by people who were inspired by God, right? But like, even if you want to believe that they were inspired by God, it had to be filtered through a human finite consciousness, right? So that's kind of the main thing that I want to say there. And I do think there was something else at the end that he said that I wanted to touch on just to
have either understood or who have begun to understand, and that includes everybody here, that separation and the terrible things that happen as a result of it is an illusion. And therefore, our
that.
first duty in life, our first duty above all other duties, is to realize the non-separate nature of our being with all others and things, and to live the implication of that understanding.
That makes me upset in my stomach. Specifically, the part where you say that like suffering is an illusion, which I think is funny a little bit. Um, I definitely came from like a belief where I definitely believed that like this entire existence was an illusion. And the way that I made sense of that was the fact that like, you know, the like I seem to be just, one person, but I'm made up of all these molecules, and at an atomic level, there's like more space than there is matter. So like it's an illusion that I can like touch something and feel it. The brain is helping make this illusion very real, etc. Which I think are, is fine or whatever. What I think is more problematic is that the implications that this has. Um, when I personally was deeper into like new agey types of beliefs, I found myself like being a little bit more disconnected from things like social justice, even. Um, I think like, yeah, because I think also for several reasons. There's probably some like spiritual narcissism there as well. Um, but yeah, basically, I stopped. I cared a little bit less about worldly problems, like the world, like whatever, like these things are, this stuff doesn't really matter. Like I'm on my mission to try to raise the vibration of consciousness, and at the end of the day, you know, good will win, and we will create a wonderful, beautiful, utopian society, and all the aliens will be dancing together. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's just not, there. It just, I lost myself in all of that stuff. But yeah, like when we start to say that things are an illusion or suffering is an illusion, like I don't. What about like are the human like the validity of the human experience? Like I think that what I've learned, what I've kind of come to the realization of, is that like there is a value in me being here on this planet right now for some reason. Um, the value is value that I choose to derive, like myself, and I can choose to be kind to people. I can choose to do all of these things. Um, but like for me to be so disconnected from everything to say that like pain and stuff like that is an illusion, I think it goes a little bit too far. You do hear about things kind of like, oh damn it, I forget what it's called. There's like a quantum mysticism type of belief where, oh, quantum entanglement, where things are all connected or whatever. And if like I forget, there's a lot of like beliefs, and I might be confusing the names of them, but there's one belief that like people are like everything is an illusion. So like the moon doesn't exist if you're not looking at it. Like if a sound happens in a forest, it's not making a sound because there's no ears to perceive it, which I just don't think is true. Like things make sounds. Like if a tree gets struck by lightning in the middle of a forest, it's going to make a sound when it falls. Like that's ridiculous to think anything other than that in terms of like what we can prove with evidence, right? I'm talking about falsifiable claims here. There can be unfalsifiable claims. Like saying that the moon disappears every time it's not being observed or recorded by a device or something like that. There's no way to prove that ever in any way. So we yeah, we'd just be, just just not really doing anything important at that time. Yeah, there was one other thing I wanted to say about the illusion stuff, but I think that it's run away from me right now, which is fine. But Hollis has another thing they posted. So if we start from that concept of consciousness learning itself, naturally we know from our finite experience that you aren't good at doing you uh, right out of the way. Why would IC be any different? I think IC means infinite consciousness? Is that what you mean? I think that's what that means. Um, Yeah. So I guess would that mean that like, wait, hmm, I'm not. So this is a different thought from this thought, but like, if infinite consciousness needs to learn things, like, does that mean that it's not infinite anymore? I've actually never thought about that until just now. Why would an infinite being need to learn anything? Like, what would be the point? What value would be there in learning a different experience? Oh, oh, okay. Maybe it's because because consciousness is so infinite that it wants to know what the finite experiences are like. Maybe that's where it goes. I'm not exactly sure. But yeah, like uh, it's frustrating to me that this video was what it was. Basically, I don't feel satisfied at all. Um, and his answer to, this is a ridiculous system. This is way too high a price for this, whatever this reason is. He's just like, nah, whatever. Suffering is an illusion. You just got to like raise your consciousness, awaken yourself, and then go awaken others. That's pretty much the responsibility that you have. Um, it's also giving slight evangelical Christian vibes. It's giving, um, you know, share the gospel with all the people, as much as you can, because yeah, they don't say, at least in Christianity, they don't say that suffering's an illusion. Um, I believe, yeah, pretty sure that they agree that suffering is suffering. And yeah, because Jesus came down to experience suffering, and he did experience suffering, and did not say that it was an illusion. But yeah, very, very interesting how there are overlaps with this and Christianity, but also vast differences as well. Um, but yeah, so let me just take that. This was an 11-minute video, I think. So if I were to summarize this 11-minute video um, into, a one sentence, it would be, fuck if I know. like, like, I don't know. Like, just because that's what I learned. I did not learn anything. Like, there was nothing useful that I feel like I got from that. Um, I feel like, what did I want? What would have been satisfying? Like, I want something other than like there is a wisdom that's higher than you that just knows better than what you know. And that's why bad stuff happens. You just don't get it yet because your brain is too small. I want more than that. I want more. I would like to know why so many people suffer, and because consciousness wants to learn itself, um, is a unfalsifiable claim, and I'm interested in finding a claim that I can actually like have evidence for, and be, I would say, confident. Not necessarily that I know what's true, because in science, and when we do things that we can actually have evidence for, we don't have. There's not always truth. We learn new things. We thought that the Earth was flat, and then we learned new evidence, and we decided something different. We thought that the sun revolved around the Earth, but then we learned that the Earth is revolving around the sun. We changed the information when we learned new information. I would like to know. I would like to know something that I can actually trust. I want better evidence than consciousness said so. Essentially, consciousness knows better than you, and consciousness just wants to experience pain and suffering. Yeah, maybe if we're gonna go with the whole idea, I don't believe in souls, but like if I was a person who believed in souls, maybe I just picked the wrong um, the wrong life or the wrong planet to be born on with all this suffering. I'm also not sure. I'm not sure if people have thoughts of like, or is in contact with any alien civilizations where they don't have suffering that exists. Um, And I honestly don't. We don't like suffering as humans, you know, and we imagine what are those called, utopian societies all the time. But a life without suffering isn't a human existence. A life without suffering is not a human existence. A life without suffering is, I'm not sure what exactly it is, but it's not even like other animals' lives. Other animals also experience suffering. My little innocent dog, he's 13. He has arthritis in his hips, and you can see him limping and suffering and struggling, and that sucks for me to see. You know, um, summer, summer thunder. What would I consider a soul? Fantastic question. One that I spent a lot of time learning about. I did a video on this, but I need to redo it because the sound didn't work, and so I need to do it over again. But basically, um, uh, wait. First, no, I'll answer that. I'll answer that later. So first about the soul. Um, Okay, so I would consider the soul, at least from what I know right now, from what like neuroscience says, is that like consciousness. So the thing that makes us like have existence and see stuff and touch stuff is a mixture of like a ton of like internal biological reactions that are happening within our body and our brain that allow us to be cognizant. Consciousness is something that exists within the body and does not separate from the body. We're able to have experiences where we can experience ourselves outside of our bodies, where we can experience a presence of some other being in the room. All of this stuff has been replicated like outside of like spiritual situations, which kind of displays the fact that like the soul is more, I would say like the soul is more of the felt sense of like that deep feeling of humanness. So like that was the one reason why I struggled with understanding if the soul was real or not, because I knew that I had a soul. I knew that I have this like this depth inside of me, this infinite, like unlimited world that exists within this organism, right? Like all these things are kind of like different types of access into like soulish type of stuff. Um, and that is, I would also say that that is a part of us that produces like really insane spiritual experiences that we have and all that stuff. Um, for right now, that's the evidence that I have. I don't have more evidence. If I get more evidence later that there really is like somewhere where they can like prove that like when we have out of body experiences that we're actually outside of our body and like we can travel and stuff like that. Cool. I really wanted to believe that too. I wanted to believe that so bad. Um, but yeah, evidence doesn't support it right now. And for what you said, Hollis, what about my own judgment about the question? What about my authority? Yeah, I have none. I have very little. That's why I'm asking questions. That's why I say that I don't know things. Um, for right now, all the stuff that I say, like stuff about the soul and stuff about other things that I think are my opinion based on like collections of evidences that I have and are just that, my one human finite opinion. I have been wrong so many times, and let me just tell you right now, I will for sure be wrong again. And it's funny because I sit here and I talk about stuff, and as I'm talking, I literally today, as I was talking in this video earlier, I was thinking like, I wonder if like I'll like regret saying this later, or if I'll like believe something vastly different later. Because I could, you know. Just last year, this time, I was speaking very, very differently about consciousness and the universe, but I've learned new information. Um, and I've learned a little bit more about the process of like of questioning and epistemology that helps me ask questions that I hadn't learned before. Um, and I guess I'm also trusting like how um, I forget where I was going with that. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure where it's going. That happens to me all the time. I lose my train of thought. Summer asks, you said you don't believe in souls, but you know you have one. Okay. So what I mean by that is I know that I have that felt experience. Like I feel like I have a soul. I have that sensation. Um, but it is just a feeling, right? Sometimes I can feel like um, I am my thoughts, like all of my thoughts represent who I am as a person, but that's not true. Some of my thoughts are intrusive thoughts. Some of my thoughts are from other parts of me that are traumatized and things like that. They don't all represent me. These are also like analogies that I use to describe other aspects of me, right? I'm just one person, right? I just have one consciousness. Um, but I use these like analogies and things like that to kind of like help us understand, I guess. And I think that the language about the soul is very common. And so like other people understand it. Because yeah, maybe if I can figure out something else to call it, maybe that's what I should be working on. But that's what I mean is I know that there is not like a literal like flowy being entity or something that lives inside of my body that like is going to exit from my body when I die, or that like entered my body at some point when I like was in the womb, or when I like took my first breath or something like that. That's another thing. Like with souls, like we don't know. People argue about souls, when souls entered bodies. We don't know when souls entered bodies. Um, okay, let me answer this other question first, then I'll get to Hollis's question. So, what do you believe is after death, if anything? I don't know. I have no clue at all. And there is no way to know at all. Um, I did some, and that's why this is important, because the video that I made about all of this stuff was one of the first videos I did for this exact reason. But I talked about like life after death, and basically like we can't prove anything. Like we would like to know like where things happen. But for example, if you were to take every single record of someone who died and came back, and they explained what the afterlife was like, you have so many different examples. Like that alone tells me that there's something curious going on here. Um, a lot of people say, like, some people kind of go to say, like, when you die, you just go to the heaven of the faith that you chose to believe in your life. Could that be true? Sure. It really could be. I just don't, I just can't prove it. What I know is that like, all I know for sure is this life. That's all I know. So I'm going to enjoy this one and live for this life. Like, I'm not going to live like, for example, I'm not going to live in fear of sin if I go to if I go to hell when I die. I'm not going to try to like erase all of my karma so that I am born in a better life next time around. I'm just going to live here right now because that's all I know. Okay. Hollis says, you seem to be looking for an outside authority to give you an answer you can believe, but you probably only will believe the answer you deduce for yourself, which is as it should be. I definitely would agree with a lot of that. Like, I think like I've done what I would say that I don't necessarily agree with there is that like I've I'm looking for authorities less. I I definitely, because of my traumatic experiences, I definitely have a lot of issues with trusting myself. And so if I have questions or curiosities about something, I will extensively research to make sure I like am doing the right thing. There could probably be other reasons for that as well. Um, so I would definitely say that I did learn from authorities in, like, for example, the field of epistemology, which is like not spiritual at all. So I looked in spaces like outside of spirituality to inform my personal spiritual practice. So like all of these things that I'm talking about help me inform my personal spiritual practice, right? Um, and my spiritual practice is grounded like purely on this planet, on the things that I can engage with literally. Um, and I want to say that I can literally engage with like spiritual concepts in the magical world that exists inside of my mind, right? I can I can create entities and gods and goddesses all I want in my mind, and that can be super fun, right? But I know that they're not like actual beings that exist. Other people will also say things like that. Like they'll say things like, um, people will reach out to angels, thinking that angels are actual separate entities. There are some people who share, who say that, or their way of explaining it, I guess, is that like angels represent like different aspects of ourselves. um, I know a person who shared that like they got like a past life reading for several different past lives, and they looked at the list and realized like those past lives are actually all current parts of themselves, which I just thought was an interesting perspective that that one person had. Um, Summer also says, I'm of that opinion too. No use of living in fear for something that isn't proven to be real. Yeah. Out of curiosity, were you raised religious or spiritual? I was raised evangelical Christian. And also, if anyone else has any other questions, I'm enjoying this. So ask me more questions if you want. But yeah, I was born very, very traditionally religious. Like actually, I don't know. Yeah, pretty strict, fundamental evangelical Christianity. Um, yeah, and I spent a lot of time being very afraid of hell and the rapture and all of that stuff. And then after that, I had fear about like um uh actually after Christianity, I had a lot less fear about the afterlife in general. Because it didn't seem that scary. Like future lives like doesn't seem that scary to me. Um, Especially, if I do have a next life, I'm not going to be aware of it at all. So for me, it doesn't seem any different than believing that this is my only life, or that I kind of go into oblivion after this. The only way that I would ever, come back is if, I was a ghost and I came back or something and talked to my past life person. But right, I don't know any of this stuff. But yeah, this is kind of like, and that's really also, I just want to go back to what Hollis said, is basically that like we always kind of go back to deduce the answers for ourselves that are right for us. And I really believe that. I think that we all have our individual paths. I heard from someone once that like every path, every spiritual path out there leads you to the only spiritual path, which is your path, the path of your heart, path of your inspiration. I'm trying to be funny. Okay. Hollis has something else to say. Let me see what this is. Looking at these questions of the soul and trying to answer them with limited human resources from our perspective, suddenly sounded like your gender is what's in your pants. Does that mean with like your gender is what you can see and what you have evidence for? Like we have evidence for your gender, right? And I think that would compare closely, except like, but we do research on gender, and we've like discovered that there are physical manifestations in the brain that represent gender anomalies. I'm pretty sure not every time that happens, but it does happen sometimes. So some of the reasons why gender and sex are different can be I guess proven or argued for with biology and that research. But I'm not sure if that's what you meant. So you can clarify if you'd like to. Um, but yeah, but at the end of the day, we are all speculating. I was talking to my wife about this yesterday. It's just like no matter what you believe, someone else is gonna hate it. Someone else is gonna not like it. Someone else is gonna disagree with you or argue with you. And let me tell you that I hate that so much. I hate people disagreeing with me, and I'm like not afraid to say I want to be liked so much all the time. I There's no point in me lying about that, right? I definitely care about what other people think about me very much. I am very sensitive to other people's opinions of me. I was raised to be very sensitive of other people's opinions of me as well. So, like, these things are kind of rooted into my nervous system and also rooted into our biology. Because if we are rejected, in a biological standpoint, that can mean death, rejection, harm, things like that. But yeah, I'm now at this place where I'm like able to be like less like disconnected from myself in a whole bunch of different ways, because I can ask myself these questions. But yeah, coming back to kind of like the idea of us having our one path, you know no matter like what we do or like where we go in life, like we're all figuring out our individual paths. We all have different things that we want to accomplish. Um, for me personally, a lot of my interests and goals and things are spiritual, like are very esoteric and things like that. And I love to explore these ideas. And a lot of what I do in my free time is like do research on these ideas and stuff like that because it fascinates me so much. Um, but yeah, I this is my personal path. I think other people live their lives with no sense of like, spirituality, but that's still like their path, like the human path. Um, so for also the other thing that annoys me in spirituality is when this happens, I think specifically in spirituality and non-Christianity, when people will say things like, oh, that person is acting so whatever, you can tell that they are a soulless person, that they don't have a soul at all. And I think that's disturbing. I think that it's disturbing that someone can look at another human being and make claims about who they are, like in like a depth type of way. But yeah. Oh yeah. So how does being queer impact your unpacking of evangelicalism slash ideas of the afterlife? Great. I have a lot of other videos that I've made about this as well. But being queer literally is the entire reason, or not the entire reason, probably one of the more pressing reasons that I chose to begin deconstructing. I just released a video. I forget what it's titled, but like something about like the reason I left the faith was because of like a suicidal ideation or something like that. But that video talks a lot about my process. But basically, like being a queer person, I think like means that I already kind of look at the world from a perspective that other people aren't looking at it, and makes me more curious. And it definitely adds to like the levels of compassion when I'm doing things as well. Another thing is that like I think that me being queer influences the kinds of people that I learn from. Also, I think that's important. Um, because if I like am hearing from someone and they like start talking about like weird gender stuff, like I might not like continue like going down that path or kind of like messing with that ideology because I know that it won't resonate with where I'm at in life. Might be great for some other person, but not for me. Yeah, so that's pretty much what it how that started. But yeah, like my first set of deconstruction was definitely like learning a lot about the different translations of the Clobber passages that they give in the scriptures against homosexuality. And that was really, really helpful for me. I ended up going to an amazing progressive church where the lesbian pastor there like really like took me under her wing and really like helped to support me in just understanding like all the stuff that was going on in my head, and really helped kind of like in a Christian way, like help me understand like how to be compassionate with myself as a queer person and a Christian, which was really awesome. and then was also really great and compassionate and like loving and supportive when I left the church entirely. So yeah, really, really great. That was a good experience. But yeah, in those videos, I talk about it a little bit more. Alrighty, and let me just take a sip real quick. Yeah, and Hollis is saying that Joe Schmo down the street is going on his gut, not on research. The average person does not research where their soul is or what happens after they die. And they just go with the best sounding story because nobody knows anyway, which is true. And really, all I'm saying here in this video is a very long winded way of saying that I don't know shit and nobody knows shit. And if someone says they know shit, they probably don't know shit. Because a scientist at the top of their game, at the top of the field, knows there's shit they don't know, knows that they have to rely on the people who are beside them, right, to help them in their research. They know that like their ideas are going to be criticized. They know that like people are like they're gonna say, "Hey, I have this idea." Everyone's gonna start poking holes in it, right? They have to like this is how I think we should be living life. We should be approaching life like looking very critically at things, like not just accepting things as they're coming out to us, being curious, very curious about stuff. I think some people would say that you know I'm being like too guarded or too hesitant, and perhaps I am. But I'm also like this is me like defending myself, you know, in a way that I think is appropriate. For example, um, like we babysat or dog sat some dogs yesterday, and when they came into the house, my dog was on the couch and he just started growling, this low growl, right? And he you know I don't speak dog, but my assumption was kind of he was like, who is in my space? Like this is my space. I'm guarded. I'm curious about who's about to enter my space, right? And there was another example where one of the dogs was sitting down chewing a bone, really excited about it and everything, but another dog got too close to its face and it was like, better watch out, dude. It like did a little growl or a little bark or something. It was like, hey, this is my stuff. Like I'm eating right now. Back away. And I think a lot of times we'll train dogs to not be reactive around food, but I think that there is like evolutionary validity in that type of response in saying like, hey, like this is what this I found this, like this is mine. I deserve to protect it and keep it as mine. We do that for people that we love. You know, if someone hurts them, we say like, hey, that wasn't okay. I'm protecting this person, you know, like, so I think like I'm even learning how to have appropriate boundaries with information, um, and people also as well. So yeah, that's pretty much I think all I wanted to share here, unless anyone has any other questions. So I'll kind of like I'll linger a little bit in case anyone does have anything else that they wanted to share. Um, but you know, yeah, I do want to kind of end on the note of like do work here on this planet now. Like, do the stuff that you can that has an impact on this planet now. Meditating is awesome, right? Super useful tool. But try to see like how can we better impact our society and our world by meditating for 6 hours on a Saturday or by like going to volunteer for 3 hours on a weekend. And there's like no like everyone is allowed to have the right to do what they want. And I'm saying, and I'm also saying that there is value in spending 6 hours a day alone or 6 hours alone meditating. There is value in doing that, but there is also very much value in getting out there and doing work, grassroots work in our communities. There is value in sharing your ideas online, like what I do. Right? This is how I like to impact the world is by talking about these ideas and hopefully helping people not get hurt by spirituality so much. Yeah, because it sucks when you're trying to heal your trauma and you traumatize yourself from trying to heal your trauma. And so I just would like to see that happen less, right? And so this is a practical way that I can help support my community. So yeah, like let's see how we can help and support people. Sometimes we do that through spiritual means, and that's great. Sometimes we do it through secular means, and that's also great. But yeah, yeah. commit to actually doing your part in supporting the reduction of suffering where we can. Um, Telling people that consciousness, is just trying to learn about itself and that suffering is an illusion. Please, I dare you to say that to the mom of a child in a cancer ward right now. You would never dare to say that because it's ridiculous. Um, or I'll say that we know that it sounds ridiculous to our finite minds in this concept. Because, like I said, I don't know any of these things. And let's wrap up with one last thought. But even if you learn the answer to any question, it's only going to be to the level we humans are capable of understanding right now. It's not the final answer ever, really. And I think that is, yeah, exactly. So this is fun and great. We're never going to know the answers to everything, to anything, and we're always going to be in a little bit of existential dread, which is great and fun. um, but yeah, we're never going to know everything. We're always going to be curious about things. I'm going to know a little bit more about things next year, because I will have had a lot more experience, a lot more, connection with other people, whatever, because I've lived more life and I've had more experiences. And when I'm on my deathbed, hopefully when I'm old and stuff like that, like I will hopefully have a lot of experiences and I might know a little bit more about the world. But I don't think that we'll really ever know. And I think the closest we get to it right now is when we have crazy spiritual experiences that at least helps us connect to something more and gives us that feeling. Um, but yeah, I am super honored that you would spend this time with me and talk about these ideas together. I just want to be curious. I want to be challenged. I want to know more people's ideas and stuff like that. I've recently all I do these days is just research these ideas. So I'm very intrigued. So if you do have stuff that you're interested in me looking at or studying, please send me the resources, and I will definitely do my own research. If you have topics that you'd like for me to discuss or a video that you find that you'd like for me to debrief, please send it to me via Instagram or my email. My information is there. All right. I appreciate you all being here. I will see you on Sundays. I've been doing live streams on Sundays. This is, early 2023 right now. That's what I'm doing. I might not be doing it for forever, but so come back on Sunday. We'll be having another conversation. And we're doing these things midweek whenever I have some extra time or have some extra ideas. And it's been lots of fun. So thank you for being a part of this. Remember to like, subscribe, comment, share your ideas. Make sure you follow me on the other places. If you found any of this information useful or you learned something and you want to support the channel, go ahead and head over to buymeacoffee.com/mathmagic and support the channel there. Alrighty, friends. It was fantastic to spend some time with you. I will catch up with you on the flippity flip. Okay? Peace and love. I will see you next time.